In this session, we will be looking at using NVivo Mac for doing a literature review. So we have a process here. We are going to start with importing literature and look at then going to classify sources, for example, how we might assign attributes like author or publication dates. We would then look at coding and adding the literature and how we would then go to like query the results, such as running word frequency, for instance, on the date, and we'll also look at the creation of externals. If you have a reference software managing system such as EndNote, and you've kept your references but not the actual PDFs of the literature of those journals within the reference managing system, you will find that when you import it into NVivo, NVivo will create externals and external references rather than taking those PDFs to the internal space. Working in conjunction with EndNote or Mendeley. We assume that we are using EndNote Reference Manager because the University of Manchester support EndNote, and there are many training courses in the library as well on how to use EndNote. So we would export XML file from EndNote to NVivo in a few stages. So we would start by opening our EndNote library and then select the articles that we wish to export to our NVivo. So once the NVivo is open and you have selected your articles, go to the File menu, select Export, and in the new window, name the file. For example, in this case, I have written NVivo 2 days literature review, and locate the location where you want to save your file. So in this case, it's a desktop, and you must change the save file as type to .xml because both NVivo Window and NVivo Mac recognize this file in NVivo. So use that and then click on the save button. You can also change the output style from there are a list of options given. I have chosen APA 7th. Once you're happy with all this, and must click export selected references, it is already clicked by default, and click the save button. So now we want to import our .xml EndNote file into NVivo. We would start by opening NVivo project and go to Data tab, and from Data tab we would go to the bibliographical data and select EndNote. A new window will open. Browse the location of the .xml file. For example, in our case it is desktop. Select .xml file and click on open. Now complete by checking all boxes on step 1, step 2, and click OK. EndNote import is complete. Note that if your EndNote library does not contain the systematic information, then neither will your NVivo. Make sure to check this box so that NVivo create memos from abstracts, keywords, and notes automatically when you import. So when you get to the exercises later, we'll be using the training project.nvpx for Mac users and .nvp for Windows users. You'll see that we have imported a few documents for you to work on. The important thing here is that you can see that 3 articles that have got a reference classification, those three have been imported from EndNote, and they automatically generated a reference classification. And the one article that we have imported manually, there's no such reference. So that would mean you would need to assign the reference classification to that article manually and then populate the file, the fields related to the classification sheet. So the other reason for using EndNote to import your literature is that in that way, it would not only make the process easy to import, but also it will save a lot of work because the EndNote would automatically create file classification for you in the NVivo. Note that when you import literature into NVivo, if it if the actual file, the PDF of the journal article, is not attached in the EndNote, when you import it to NVivo, it will go to the external. NVivo will locate it into the external, and it will not go to the internal folder or internal literature folder. So make sure that you have the article attached when it is in the EndNote prior to importing it into the NVivo project. So if your document is imported into the externals, the NVivo will take the abstract and make that into a memo, and you would be then able to take or to make notes in that memo about that particular article. So we will now move on to step 2, which is classify sources from literature. So here is an example of the reference classification sheet, which is automatically generated when we imported a library from EndNote. And you can see that here in the reference classification, there is the name and journal, or all of these in this case are journal articles, the author's name, and also the year and the title. All of them are automatically filled for us. So that saves a lot of time. Some information might be unassigned because that information was not provided in the EndNote, and it might look redundant, but you can always fill it by clicking on the magnifying glass and identifying it or writing it manually. So we can also see these classification in a different way, and that is by clicking on the attributes next to classification. We can see that like for example, the title is here, or the author is here. So whether it's a book, journal, or anything, you can fill it up here as well. Or if you think that some of the fields are not right or are redundant, you would just select that and right click and delete. Now you can select multiple attributes. For example, from here I selected the author, the title, and a few more by clicking on Command key from your keyboard and selecting a few of these attributes with your mouse pad or with your clicks, and then right clicked when I selected 3-4 items, and I could see visualize the hierarchy chart. So if you do it, it will create an interesting hierarchy chart for you. Let's see that. So here we have a hierarchy chart. We can change it by different colors, and also we can view different levels by moving the slider. Now, if you add any new reference independently by just data and importing a document or PDF, make sure that you add the attributes to the same file classification so that you avoid creating difficulties for yourself later. Um, we are now moving on to step 3, code and annotate. Now, remember that you are coding or annotating your data, and your data in this case is a literature review, or that is journal articles or other literature sources. So we have created a number of nodes and thought carefully about what kind of nodes would be useful for literature review. So we've got aims and focus. This is where you would take the text that relates to the paper, to the description of the aims and focus of that paper, and then we have research methods. So we have broken down it into a number of findings or contribution to the literature in relation to methods, epistemology, methodology, research questions, etc. So under research questions, for instance, where the paper states their research question, you would just code that as research questions. Where they mention their sample size, the sample size of that paper, not talking about some other paper, the paper that you are reviewing, you would make a note of that. So you may put text under sample size alongside. So for example, justification for that sample size or any information could go on to that section into that node, which is called sample size. We also then are looking at research gap or research recommendations. So if the paper talks about the identify gap at the end of the paper, then you can put that text there, or any implications and research recommendations arising from that particular study in their particular nodes. Themes, that's very important, and that's where you need to do a bit more work. So we'd expect that if you are conducting either a content or thematic analysis of your literature review, probably more in thematic analysis, you end up coming with a number of themes, and therefore you probably want to then make some sub themes as well, and that's up to you. So you just right click and you make a new node or sub node. So if you right click on a node, you can create a sub node which you can then drag and attach to another node as well. Or you can click in the list view, right click, and then create a parent node which is not linked to any other node. So you might want to change the existing theme, or you might want to rename it. In order to rename, just right click on the node and select more info. So because yeah, and then you would be able to rename it. So we have given you a basic template from which you can start. You have the training project .nvpx for Mac people and .nvp for NVivo window users, and that's the one you'll be using in the furthering NVivo, the literature review session. So you may also want to track other features such as the geographical, historical, or socio-political changes in your literature. And if that's the case, then just simply add nodes. So you can extend the literature nodes and in social, political, historical, geographical, or other nodes. So when you are reading through your literature, because we still have to read the literature, you may come across some quotations or potential quotations that could become, I should say, part of your future literature review. And if that's the case, we just recommend that you make NVivo code of those quotations. So remembering that NVivo code is a code that is named the exact wording of the text. So make a number of NVivo codes where you are capturing your words, your text as a key potential quotation for the topic you are using. So here we have an example, and in this case we have the text. We just right click on the text and we select code NVivo, and the whole paragraph there, which is this highlighted text, there are some of the all this some of us out there that are looking for ways to try to help the industry. This would become as the name of the code. Now, although in this particular case I have coded multiple, like a few sentences, it would be better to keep NVivo code as small. So for example, one sentence, you can make it two sentences as well, but something like which is more precise. You may also annotate literature. For that purpose, you would take a phrase, right-click on that phrase and select annotation. This will give you a chance to write your reflection about that particular phrase. All the annotations of the document could be seen by all at once if you click on the top right corner of the detailed view, and then that by clicking on that it will tell you about all the annotations in that particular document. The annotation folders stays under the notes folder in the navigation menu. We have training, NVPX and NVP projects for you with some exercises. You will be practicing yourself different ways of coding literature. So we really recommend that you try on auto coding your document and check if it is any help in terms of output. One tip is that if you are auto coding on group of documents that are on a common theme, you would get better results. So for example, if you are getting articles from diverse set of literature and all kind of topics, you might not get a helpful response when you auto code it. So we recommend that you divide your literature into a number of subfolders based on themes, which has more focus, so that when you run auto coding on that particular file or group of documents, you get results which are more helpful. Now, note that NVivo Mac cannot do auto coding on documents like Word documents or PDF documents. Therefore, you may wish to export your project to NVivo Windows and bring it back to Mac after performing autocoding. So in order to do so, you can look at converting NVivo Mac project to Windows video, which is in our channel. You can export the report then and import it again through data tape. So see, once you import that, see our NVivo Windows Literature Review video for instructions on how to conduct auto-coding. We are aware that autocode can be done on the document, but not for the purpose of literature review, because on documents you can only autocode by speaker, which is different than what we recommend, that is autocode by themes um, and creating nodes, etc. You can also autocode dataset in NVivo Mac, but again, that's a different thing. Like autocoding, NVivo Mac cannot do auto summarizing on documents. Therefore, we recommend that you look at NVivo Windows Literature Review video, because it will demonstrate how to use first autocode your literature and then use framework matrices to create auto summary. You can see those videos in your own leisure time. You can also convert your project from Mac to Windows and then convert it back from Windows to Mac. Make sure that you have a master copy of your project when you convert, just in case if you lose anything, so that you have your own copy. Here is a link to a short video on making framework matrices, on how to summarize the matrices, from Big Video. So for framework matrices, please see these clips. So if you open the slides, you will be able to just click on this and it should take you to the video. So you need to start at 36:11. It's about 2.5 minutes, and you would be able to see how framework matrices have been made. Again, for node matrices, you have almost 4 minutes of video there, so click on that link for the practice. Okay, so we have looked at coding of the literature, and really we've got quite a simple structure, that you have your literature in literature files, that you import into files and subfolders, and you've then got a nice coding structure that you can use to collect key information about that. And so you go through and read, because of course this doesn't stop you reading, even though you can go a long way with autocoding. So let's link now literature review methodology. So basically what we need to do is to develop the system, the structure of the nodes, so that they relate to each of the stages in your systematic review. So we've looked before at Boland et al. And their stages, and that's a good one to look at. And basically we might create classification sheets that match the stages. So we'll look a little bit more into how to do some of this in the next session, but I want to just come back to this bit a bit later in some ways. So you don't want your systematic review process to be too complicated. We try and make the systems, the review process and then the load system, as straightforward as possible. So step number 4 is query and visualize. So you can, although we do not have autocoding and framework matrices, or auto summarizing. In NVivo Mac, we can run all kind of queries, including text query, word frequency query, matrix query, cross-tab query, um, and all other functions which are there. You can also visualize. So, for example, you can create some hierarchy charts, and also you can do explore diagram. All these are possible in NVivo Mac. We have separate videos about all this visualization. However, just keep that in mind that when you are conducting your literature review, your literature is your data rather than the interview transcripts. So we recommend that you see videos on visualization to conduct this step. If you have coded your literature review manually, you can visualize your coding using hierarchy charts. So for that, you would go to Data tab and go to Files, select all the files which are there, and then right click. For example, in this case, we have the Mac sample project open, and we have selected area and township. And if we right click on it, we can see visualize. And if we click on hierarchy chart, it will create a hierarchy chart for us. So as an example, you can see the hierarchy chart where you can compare coded literature by nodes or files or cases or attribute values, and with other nodes, cases, and selected items. And you can also compare academic articles to make comparative summaries using hierarchy chart. You can look at different videos about charts to help you scope your literature review. Here is another recommended video for you. We would say start watching from 38.41 in the video link and see charts facility to help you scope your literature review. Step 5 is memos. Just a little reminder from last session. Remember, when you use memos, only one memo can be linked to an internal or external document. However, you can have as many freestanding memos as you like. Memos can be used to record your thoughts and reflections about the document in NVivo and to create a journal. Now, we recommend that you use EndNote, but there are also other reference managing systems like Mendeley, which are supported by NVivo. However, note that EndNote Web doesn't import into NVivo. So as we have discussed previously, when you import a .xml file from EndNote, the NVivo automatically create memos with abstract and keywords. In order to install EndNote, we have a video about it, and you can watch that in your spare time. Here are a few steps following which you can install EndNote on your personal computers. To create a memo, select the document, for example, journal article, to which you want to assign memo, and go to Create button from the top menu and click on Memo. In the new window, Memo Properties will open. Add a name and write a description. you can write the decision thoughts about that particular article. In the classification drop-down box where you can see no value, select reference. In the attribute sections, write the attribute value. So for example, the access date, a session number, alternate title or author's name, or all these, fill those accordingly and click done. The memos are placed automatically under the notes folder in the navigation menu. To create a memo link, go to File under Data tab and select Item, for example, Literature. Right-click on the article or document and choose Memo Link. After that point, choose Existing. This will take you to all list of memos which are in the project. You will select the one with which you want to attach this new document, for example NVivo 2 days, and click on select. We can see here the article analyzing dash dash is linked to a memo. If you select a memo and right click on it, you can have different options. For example, you can visualize, autocode, etc. So you will be using the workshop exercise resources that we have provided already on the pen drive and on Blackboard. And you will be using the NVivo training project, an EndNote library, a few journal articles, and the exercise sheets which we call the workbook. Now exercise A is to open the training project file and explore it to look at the structure of the project, look at the file structure, look at the node structure, look at the classification, and then consider how these three elements connect. Consider how the node structure might be linked to your literature review methodology. Once you are happy with all this, you can move on to exercise B. So in exercise B, import literature from EndNote. Don't worry if you have not got your EndNote file. We have made an EndNote file that you can use for this purpose. So you can import literature from EndNote to NVivo, check the classification that are made, and if any articles are not classified as journal articles, you can assign the classification. In the coding exercise, you are going to practice coding using the node system we have provided, and as described earlier, you are going to autocode the literature files using the themes option within autocode. And you are going to look at auto-coded nodes and consider how you might use themes within literature review. Now, make sure that auto-coding the literature review might be something to consider, but you need to convert your project to NVivo Windows. And to complete this exercise, please pair up with the window user in the group. This is the end of NVivo Mac Literature Review video.